Mike, your lower third always looks fantastic. Oh, hello, viewers. Come and jest with the guests that are the best, and I'm not saying this under duress. Welcome to D Infinity Live, the multi-platform, multi-publisher, online, you can see it on your screens, gaming webcast. I am your host, William T. Thrasher. With me, as always, are our other hosts, Michael Jolly Varahola and Brendan Cass. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good. I'm glad to be here.
Good.
Excellent. And tonight, our topic is insurmountable encounters, encounters that are wildly out of balance with the rest of the game. But before we dive headfirst into that topic, Brendan, what has been going on with our website, d-infinity.net?
Well, I'll get the most fun way. Mike here celebrated a birthday just now, and he most generally giving away copies of his book Necropolis. So if you haven't read that, so keep that way going. So definitely go there. It's on the front page, and the link is right there. In addition to that, our on has 100 entries, so that's always a fun one. It's a list of 100 random things. We've got an article, bonus content, on a baker named Epusius. He is not your typical baker in that he has been a slave and all kinds of other things. So he's worth checking out if you haven't picked up a copy of Lives, or even if you have. And yeah.
Bonus content Lives. He's not in the book, so he's bonus content for people who have or haven't seen it. He's a good example of what we've got in Lives of Coast, but then he's something that's just a little fun extra for anyone who already has it. And that's by our own Heath Farndon,
who we know is watching right now.
Better be.
So, hey. Anything else going on the website, Brendan?
Well, Clint has also announced that he's going another series of posts, new one every Thursday, for the game system RuneQuest, and the first one that he's posted, Monster, that system. So we've already got a lot of really great on the D Infinity website. Now we have, so that's really exciting.
So
it'll be cool to get a classic game system.
.net, D Infinity Online.
At d-infinity.net.
Excellent. And Mike, what is going on with our co-publisher Skirmisher this week?
Well, we are back into the routine of doing weekly releases of new products. Those are available through a number of online sites. Probably the one that most people are familiar with is DriveThruRPG or RPG Now. We released on Tuesday Wisdom from the Wastelands, issue number 43, Optional Combat Rules 2, and that's by our own Chris Van Deelen, and that is a series of rules that introduces game mechanics for things like charging, weapon recoil, variable weapon firing stances, ammunition cook-offs, grappling, so some really good stuff, and that is all statted for basic system, which is to say basically the predecessor of the D20 system. It's licensed as a Mutant Future supplement. Basically, it can be plugged into any kind of sci-fi or modern or post-apocalyptic game. So that came out on Tuesday. 2 weeks, or a week from this coming Tuesday, we'll have out Wisdom from the Wastelands issue number 44, Unique Super Science Artifacts 3. And Unique Super Science Artifacts 1 and 2 have been very popular, so that will be out a week from Tuesday. And then on Tuesday, we've got something really special coming up. I don't know that we've talked about this a lot on the show yet, but we'll be talking about it over the coming couple of years, we are now in the centennial of World War I. This is the 100-year anniversary of the Great War, of the first huge modern war. And we are commemorating that at Skirmisher and D-Infinity. And on Tuesday, we'll be releasing the first thing that ties in with our commemoration of the Great War. And what that is a collection of 26 pieces of high-resolution period art from French publications. So the publication that we've culled this art from is a World War I era French publication called La Bayonet, the Bayonet. And basically we'll be releasing a complete PDF copy of an issue of La Bayonet, and then as separate high-res individual pieces, every single piece of art from it that people can then use in their own publishing products or publication or whatever.
Very, very cool. I
Good
cannot
stuff.
wait to check some of that stuff out. All right, well, gentlemen, are you ready for the main topic?
I think I'm ready for the main topic.
We
we
can't
covered
rely
it. I
on
don't
you
know if
thinking
we're
you're
gonna
ready.
be
You
able
have to be ready.
Well, I'm ready for it. I'm just trying to remember if there's anything else we wanted to mention, but I don't think there is. If there is, I'll get it in on my final word, or I'll find an excuse to get it in there. So I'm ready.
You need no excuses, Mike. All right. So tonight our topic is insurmountable encounters. Those are encounters that are wildly out of balance with the rest of the game, encounters that are heavily weighted against the level of the player characters, and in many cases encounters that are just plain weird and inexplicable. As we get into that, before we go to our questions and comments from the audience, Brendan, what is your take on insurmountable encounters?
Well, there are two ways that I see them. There's the way, and there's the way that I see popular culture with gaming doing them, and how most DMs appear to do them. So I'll start with the one that I don't like, and then go on to the one that I do like. Is encounters that are impossible at party because GM pick. That appears to be the popular one for some reason. Don't know.
It has been for 40
why.
years.
The version I do like, right? The version I do like is when it appears to be impossible. Full play, or clever use of skills or other non-standard resources, the player passed it.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Brendan, because half the time when I include an insurmountable encounter, that is exactly my motivation for it. It's a big, crazy problem that I have not even thought of a solution for, simply because I wanted there to give my players an opportunity to get creative and find an unconventional solution to the problem. How about you, Mike? What is your take on insurmountable encounters?
Well, I think your motive behind the insurmountable encounter is important. I think they have their place. I agree with Brendan that just coming up, if the insurmountable encounter is just a device for killing off the party, well, that's not very fun. I don't think that serves a whole lot of use. On the other hand, if the insurmountable encounter is there to reinforce to the players that there are lots of dangerous things in the world, and they are not necessarily the most dangerous among them, I think that's useful. I think they can be good devices for testing players' limits, setting up an encounter, and we're using the word insurmountable as if it means really, really tough but surmountable. But in actuality, insurmountable means it can't be overcome. So we can use it in both ways tonight. But if we want to talk about it in terms of something that can't be overcome, that actually has usefulness too, because it can be used as a device for just seeing how far the characters can be pushed. You can actually have success be based on how much they're able to accomplish against an insurmountable encounter. The fact that they don't succeed against it doesn't really necessarily have to matter. And it can be used as a way of getting them to burn up resources if they've got too many. So the insurmountable encounter, I won't use up all my A material now. I think it has some very good potential uses in the game, and that periodically you want to be using an insurmountable encounter to set a specific tone or achieve a specific end.
Oh, Brendan, you had something to say on this.
To what Mike was saying, in that case, it's not degrees of success, but lesser degrees of failure.
Sure.
That really measure how well your players are doing.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, if they're fighting some titanic undead giant and he steps on them in round 2, and that's it, and they're out of the game, out of the encounter, that's not very successful. But if they come up with some thing that the DM didn't think of, and they manage to slow the thing down, and they inflict some damage on it, and they can't win, but they've just made that heroic, over-the-top effort, then, in game terms, that's very possibly a success.
Well, there was an old computer game based on the Harlan Ellison short story, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, and there's something Harlan Ellison said about that game that I use to describe a lot of the games I run, particularly games set within the worlds of the Cthulhu mythos, and that's that this game is not about winning, it's about losing gloriously. And
there's something to be said for that. I had a great encounter where we had a goblin hunting ranger, and he got overrun by goblins. And basically, I didn't know how many goblins this guy was going to be able to fight. I mean, eventually, he was going to miss some of his hits. Eventually, they were going to make some of their hits. Eventually, he was going to go down. And the only question was, how long would it take? So it was actually, and my intent wasn't to kill the guy's character off. I mean, eventually he got knocked below 0 hit points, and he was captured, and they had some thing they were going to do with him, whatever. The intent wasn't to kill him with an insurmountable encounter. It was to give him an over-the-top challenge and see how far he could take it.
Very cool. All right, our first question comes from Adam Schmidt, who wants to know, what is the most epic character death during said encounters you've experienced? For me, as a player, this was back in college. We were playing a game of 7th Sea, and my knowledge of the setting is sketchy, but our pirates were at sea, and we started getting chased by this ghost ship, and it's a specific kind of ghost ship that, as near as I can tell, there's flat out no way you can deal with that ghost ship. It's just going to haunt you until you get on dry land, and nothing you do will harm that ghost ship. But of course, I didn't exactly know this at the time. So one of the effects of the ghost ship is that it kind of creates this siren song effect. So you hallucinate that the ship is actually full of all of your best dead sailor friends. So and so I was playing this old sea salt, and I said, okay, so my character is hallucinating, right? Yeah. Does it matter what I'm hallucinating so long as that hallucination involves my best friends being on that other boat? And he goes, no, it doesn't matter. Okay, can I take my girlfriend with me to that boat? Like, what girlfriend? This lovely girlfriend right here. And I mimed picking up a powder keg and started like waltzing with it and waltzed onto the boat with the powder keg. And then since my kid had been established, my character was a smoker, I went to kiss the powder keg and got my corncob pipe close enough to it that it exploded, taking out my sailor. Did nothing to the ghost ship whatsoever, but it was a wonderful death. I was very happy with that slapstick demise. How about you, Brendan?
Using the term waltz would have been the death knell for you in my game.
Over the top death, because it was a crazy, intense situation, but the death was caused by something really mundane and normal. My players were all inside the belly of a leviathan, and they had caused. No, they're not running the scenario, Mike.
Okay.
Yeah, this was when I was running. This is when Peleus died.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so they were all inside the belly of this Leviathan, and it was really intense. They were fighting off ghouls, lots and lots of sea ghouls, and one of the players had become paralyzed by the ghoul. And he was just sort of lying there on the deck, and the players were able to fight off successfully these ghouls for long enough that they were able to get sacks of spices, of pepper, up into the airway of this Leviathan from inside, and they made it sneeze. So it sneezed them all out, and they escaped the ghouls, and they escaped the Leviathan, but one of them died. And it was that character that had been paralyzed. They never thought to tie him down to the ship. So while the ship was rocking from the sneeze of the Leviathan, he just rolled off the side, and he was paralyzed, so he drowned. So it was a crazy, over-the-top encounter. They were never going to beat these ghouls. They were never going to kill the Leviathan, and they escaped it successfully. But this guy died in the lamest way just because he forgot to hang on when they escaped.
How about you, Mike? Your most epic character death?
Well, I'll give two briefly. First one was I was going to give was from a Call of Cthulhu scenario I played in 30 years ago. It must have been, well, it was in the mid-'80s. And basically my character was a homicidal, emaciated, I think he had tuberculosis or something horrible, British soldier in the 1920s. And this was a scenario that took place in Iraq. And I think it was an official Chaosium scenario. We were running around in little armored cars in the Iraqi desert, and I think there was some shtick whereby some armored car had like a brain canister controlling it or something like that. I think this was an actual official Chaosium Call of Cthulhu scenario. But some sort of gate opened, and my character, who was unhealthy and really unsavory anyway, ended up pulling the pins on his necklace of grenades and stepping into the portal that was opening to Yuggoth or wherever the hell it was, and completely blowing himself up with this wreath of grenades that he wore, and taking out the gate with him as the only decent, selfless thing he did in his entire life. So that was one. The other epic death that comes to mind is from a recent scenario I ran, and involved a cleric that's one of our Swords of Coast fantasy campaign setting archetypal characters. His name is Peleus. He is a cleric of Poseidon named Peleus. Peleus is the only character that dies on a regular basis in our games. He's a good character. He's well armored. He's got good weapons. He's got a good spell array. Different person plays him every time, and he gets killed about every other scenario. So he was being... What's that?
Drowned. I didn't make that clear. Priest of Poseidon drowned. Hilarious.
The shame. Well, in the scenario I ran, I believe, who was playing it? Was it Steve or was it Richard?
That was Richard.
He ended up battling a three-headed skeletal dog. So it was like a skeletal version of Cerberus. And the dog has the ability, if it's really, really lucky, to strike 3 critical hits. And if it does, it can rend. And if it rends, it just rips pieces off of the target. So it ended up getting 3 critical hits and rending Peleus, who was heroically engaged in battle with it. So I think it pulled off both his arms and his head. Or maybe it was just both his arms and his leg. Whatever. It completely dismembered him in this battle. So it was sort of like a perfect storm, as it were, to use a good Poseidonic metaphor there. But that was pretty epic, and that once again involved Peleus. Peleus actually holds the record for the majority of heroic deaths, epic deaths in our Swords of Coast fantasy campaign setting.
Yep, and they keep resing them. We had to collect parts after beating down the skeletal dog because he's back. If you run long enough, he'll come back. So we had to beat him down, wait for get out before the regen. We had to collect arms and stuff so we could put them back together as them again.
That is fantastic. All right. So next, let's see. Next question. Oh, comes from Heath. Hi, Heath. Good to get your name dropped once again. Wants to know, have you ever or would you ever give your party a do-over if you felt like you dropped them into it unintentionally? I'm gonna say no, if only because I do have a long-standing policy that unless I'm playing in a game where time travel is involved, nothing is retroactive. Anything that's established has happened, no matter how crazy or catastrophic. And when it comes to insurmountable encounters, I do everything I can to make sure that the players are fairly warned that this encounter may very well be vastly unbalanced and not in their favor. The closest I think I've ever come to a do-over, and I may have told this story before, was a Call of Cthulhu campaign where the investigators were trapped in the basement of a serial killer who was putting people in the basement and feeding them to this monster that he had down there that used to be his wife, who he had tried to resurrect, and unfortunately she came back as this gelatinous, cannibalistic thing. So
They always do.
oh yeah, and so they're all tied to chairs in the basement. They all fail their a check to try to escape from their bonds. Nothing is working, and one of the players just starts reciting random words he remembered reading in a Mythos book, hoping that it helps. And then an avatar of Nyarlathotep appeared in human form, and basically put them in a quantum state where they were simultaneously free of the basement and being devoured by the monster. And if they could do a series of favors for him before the next midnight, then the timeline in which they were not in the basement would be the actual timeline. But if they failed, they would the timeline where they got eaten would be the real timeline. So they were simultaneously alive and dead. That's the closest I've come to a real do-over. How about you guys?
I
I don't know
mostly.
if I can.
Go ahead, Brendan.
Okay, I was about to say I don't know if I could match that. You're getting into quantum physics and parallel lines there, so that was very cool, Will. No, I don't do do-overs either because the story is told the way it is. I don't like to break that flow. If they do die and it happened by accident, things are going to happen. Either they're going to play new characters. Usually that doesn't happen, or I'm going to figure out a way to somehow keep things running. Usually as a GM, you have a lot of options to incapacitate somebody without killing them outright. Unless the dice come out really, really bad and you end up going in D20 terms, you go over those -10, or you grade them or something like that. Usually you can incapacitate them and then back in some kind of nasty situation later, but one that they can recover from as a GM. But if they do die, typically there's all kinds of villains that have seen their handiwork and know how much a menace they can be as sort of magical means. They can be brought back and used as a tool. It's another adventure hook and puts them in some situation that they're going to escape.
And actually, this brings up something I did want to discuss with you all. I've noticed that a lot of insurmountable encounters can become deadly very, very swiftly, simply because maybe the players charge in head first. They don't pick up on your warnings, subtle hints, or outright warnings. Or it's just one of those things where so many conflicts in RPGs just automatically escalate into violence and murder. But do you two think that players should have an expectation that the encounters in the game are going to be balanced? Is that a fair expectation to have?
You know what? I think balance is something that is a GM concern. I think if it gets to the point where players are thinking in terms of balance, then a mistake has been made. Then a meta element has been introduced into the game. I have a very, very, very good knack for keeping my players completely terrorized. When they come out of an encounter successful, they are certain that I was trying to kill them from beginning to end, and it is only their abilities and luck and the fact that the gods really stepped in that they survived despite all of my attempts to slaughter them. So I keep the players really, really terrified, and they do not have a sense that there is an internal balance in my world. My players generally understand, and if they ever saw through this elaborate illusion I create, then I really would have to brutalize them. So it's to their advantage to not see through it. So no, I think balance is important, but I think that has got to be something that never leaks through the GM's facade and makes it to the characters. Now that said, going back to do-overs just for a second, I do run a pretty fair game, and generally a character only will die, and I've said this before on this show, a character will generally only die if A, they do something really dumb, and B, they're also unlucky. I mean, terrible things happen to characters in my games, but generally they're not dying unless they're unlucky and dumb. You know, those happen together, they can die. And I generally will not do a do-over in that case. I've done do-overs before. You know, I did a few things where I made a mistake. I dismissed it as a dream sequence and, you know, set it up as an elaborate series of omens. I've done that when I've made a mistake, and I didn't want to penalize the characters. I've come up with Deus Ex Machina ways to prop them up and offset the damage I've caused them if I screwed something up. But one of the most famous heavy casualty games we ran is when the players were going into the Temple of Elemental Evil Fire, and they refused to put on any fire protection spells. And I said, you're going into the Elemental Temple of Fire, you need to put fire spells on. And they said, we're saving our spells until later. And they were obliterated. And I just shrugged. I said, I don't know what to say to you. You know? No do-overs on that one.
Oh, yeah. And next question comes from a friend of the show, Richard Penwarden, wants to know, as GMs or players, do you consider using a powerful being's abilities against itself? The specific example he describes is Bilbo flattering Smaug, which is, or Smaug, depending on which side of the wall you're on. But anyway, that is, I think, falls into the category of using your own cleverness to find your way around an insurmountable encounter. You know, how many times have we played a game where a ridiculously powerful, indestructible, maybe even planet-cracking avatar of a god shows up, and someone starts flattering the god, and calms the god's emotions or manipulates it. I think that's great. That's finding a more interesting solution to the problem than just combat. Beyond that, I love it when players find creative ways to use a powerful being's powers and abilities against itself. I was doing a superhero game, and this Galactus-type creature had come down and was flying over the city of New York, and it was using these lasers to burrow through the city to try to get to the power source that it needed, because it was stealing Earth's resources. And it was it was ridiculously powerful, and I had not come up with a built-in solution for how the superheroes were going to defeat it. And as they're doing it, the superhero, who was a genius, came up with a brilliant idea. One of the characters was a teleporter, so the super genius built this rig that the teleporter could wear that would let the teleporter open up portals. and the guy with super strength threw the teleporter in like where they. I'm sorry, no, the super speedster was tracking the lasers, and they got the teleporter in the path of one of the lasers. He opened up a portal. The laser went into the portal. They opened up the other end of the portal right underneath this cosmic being. So the being blasted itself with its own attack, which was the most powerful attack in the game, and one of the few things that could actually hurt this being. And that was not planned. It was just all quick thinking on the part of the party. It was brilliant.
Pretty clever. I'd like to interject a shout out to a friend, Richard.
By Michael Bay.
Yeah, right. I want to do a shout out to Richard Penwarden, who had asked that question. I understand that he is actually watching from England right now. So hello to Richard.
Yes, cheers.
So, oh, I lost my train of thought. You go ahead, Mike.
Well, now the question was what again?
Turning the powers of insurmountable beings or encounters against them.
Yeah. I remember what I was going to say.
Yeah, you lost me at Galactus and
literally examine that always, but the most notable is Medusa. You know, did she go down? A mirror, right? So her own greatest ability was turned against her. So if that, you know, you've got that example. They're doing that with other very powerful monsters.
Yeah, and I like that. I generally I can't remember the last time I ran a scenario that had something as you know, powerful as what you described. You know, but powerful is relative. A story that I wrote last year that's being published by what is Ernie and Benoit's company called?
Gygax magazine?
No.
GP.
GP Adventures. Gygax Poirot. That's right. And an adventure story I wrote for them called Opal of Light and Shadow is actually about a first-level gnome illusionist who battles a Medusa. Well, a first-level gnome illusionist can't defeat a Medusa in a toe-to-toe battle, but by using cleverness and illusion, there is a way that our character, our heroine Opal, can turn the Medusa's petrifying power against it. And that involves using a bit of foresight and taking a spell that under normal conditions nobody would ever take, but if this character reads the clues properly that come up in the adventure, the player may think, oh, wait a minute, you know, just having another phantasmal force is not going to be what I need. This is this. So yeah, I think that's great. You know, it's sort of like gaming jujitsu. You know, turning a creature's power, its force, against itself. I think that's terrific. So yeah, and it makes the players feel good when they can do something like that, because that really does tie in with the whole idea of insurmountable encounters. It would be insurmountable if they relied only on their own power. Being able to turn the monster's power against itself is what makes it a surmountable encounter. So yeah, I think that's terrific. If you can do it, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, and actually, something related to insurmountable encounters, and this is a term that I actually had learned from Patrick Renee at Paizo, which is the idea of the Wahoo monster, where it's a being, it's big, it's powerful, it could take out most parties in 1 or 2 hits. But it's not there to be an antagonist. It's there to be something that increases the sense of wonder in your fantasy setting. You know, giant flying whales, or like the dragon you see in the distance on the hilltop. It's not necessarily burning down civilization, but you knew it could if it wanted to.
Right.
You know, there are some, and there are some, you know, insurmountable encounters where it is just there to be something wonderful, to be something that the players can marvel at, or the characters can marvel at. Not that they can't turn into combat encounters if somebody sees that and just sees a giant pile of XP and charges right towards it.
Right. The viciously stupid party
Our,
turned it into something.
the Leviathan, in my example, it was an island. They didn't even know they were in. And crap, I'm inside a giant
Right.
monster. These things exist. This can happen to me.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's really a monster that's so big and so powerful and so timeless that it's really part of the landscape.
You know, a lot of mythos deities, it's you know, quite the same way. If you survive a Cthulhu, a session of Call of Cthulhu, uh, then you're just sort of left with the shock and one dark wonder of knowing that there are such beings that exist out there. Oh, and actually, Mike, speaking of like Wahoo monsters, I did want to talk about something. In our book, Kos Encounters, there was actually an encounter that was dropped from the book, and I was wondering if we might be able to talk about it.
All right.
I wrote the random encounter table for the nation of Amazons, Amazonia,
Yeah.
and one of the results, one of the random encounters are giantess encounters. And with the giantess encounters, there was in the original draft of that section of the book, there was a note that anytime you rolled a giant encounter in Amazonia, there was a 1% chance that the giant was a Hecaton Cherries that had escaped during the Titanomachia. And that was, I think, it was cut from the book under the notion that that would be too powerful for virtually any party to deal with, you know, an actual Titan being walking around.
Well, that might have been part of the reasoning behind it. But I think what you're getting around to saying is you're not entirely satisfied with that reasoning, and I don't think that would be it was the entire reasoning. I think as much as anything, it's because it would imply that particular piece of geography in our world of coast is more likely than another piece to have that kind of encounter, and it wouldn't be. So I think the placement of that encounter was just implying a lot about Amazonia that wasn't necessarily true. And that was because of one author, in this case you, had decided that was something they wanted to include, but that was really tweaking what we wanted to say about the world beyond. It was such an unbalancing encounter that it said things about Amazonia that weren't true. So if we had an encounter there, then that would be okay, and maybe that's what we want to say. Maybe we want to say, you know, if you roll such and such a result, then go to the Insurmountable Encounters table, which can be used in any nation, regardless of the geography or political system or whatever. Maybe that's what we want to do. Maybe there ought to be an insurmountable / deity / titan encounter subtable that can apply to anything. So the problem wasn't that it was insurmountable. The problem was that it sent the wrong message about this particular country.
You actually make a really good point, and one, I think an Insurmountable Encounters table would be a fantastic
I think we ought to
addition.
do that. I haven't thought of that, but sure, we can do that. A universal table that just applies to the world overall. You know, if a God's War erupts in one little corner, that could happen anywhere. Though I'd say the odds go up around a volcano, because those really tie into the backstory of our world a lot.
Yeah, and I do like, you know, you mentioned that having that kind of encounter present does communicate something about that region of the world, which we may not want to be true, because again, with like an insurmountable monster encounter, maybe the PCs are canny enough to realize they can't just fight whatever this thing is, but immediately someone's going to decide, oh, well, if this thing is here, its lair must be nearby. And I could see so many campaigns being derailed because the players want to track down the Hecaton Cherry's lair or the pit to hell that it crawled out of.
And really, one of the reasons we have Amazonia as a nation is because we really want to play with that whole idea that the ancient Greeks had about gender differences and gender tensions, and really address that in our world, and address what happens when males are second-class characters and they go to a nation where that's the case, and have encounters with giantesses, and just sort of turn things around a bit, have a little bit of a Wonderland sense to it, and have political tensions. The idea that we would take this carefully crafted land of Amazonia and then just make it a hunting ground for some big-ass monster that doesn't really have any more business there than anywhere else, I think that was more my concern than anything.
Oh, yes. I know, Brendan, were there any insurmountable encounters that you had considered putting into your own tables? Brendan, you coming through?
Can you hear us? All right. Well, we can
Technical difficulties.
Now, he does have some insurmountable encounters. He did the maritime encounters tables for encounters of coasts, and he's got the Leviathan that he was talking about on there. The island fish. That's the island fish from the 1001 Arabian Nights, the Tales of Sinbad. That was really part of our inspiration for the Leviathan. And then we picked up that name from the Bible. It's a biblical name applied to a 1000 Arabian Nights monster. But the ancient Greeks had a monster that they called a Cetus that was the same thing. So this is sort of a universal monster. But that would be his insurmountable encounter, and that's on one of his tables. I've got a horrible monster called on my mountain encounters called a Shire Man, and it's basically a huge giant that has become dormant and fallen asleep and been covered over by earth, and generally had little villages and towns built on it. And it's essentially, a 100-hit-die hill giant, so it's pretty much insurmountable. So I've got that on my mountains encounter.
Oh, and actually, speaking of the island fish and insurmountable encounters and the Shire Man, if you want some great inspiration just for unconventional monsters and also some insurmountable encounters, check out the book Expedition by Wayne Douglas Barlow. It describes an alien ecosystem, but there's this creature in it called the Groveback, and it's this gigantic. It's bigger than any land creature on Earth. It's just this gigantic three-legged beast that is so big that forests grow on its back. And whenever it absorbs all the water in an area, it just lifts itself out of the ground and migrates across a quarter of the planet. It goes to a whole new hemisphere before settling down again.
And Derek Holland has a number of monsters like that in his various Mutant Future books that Skirmisher has published. So people should check out Derek Holland's Mutant Future books on Drive-Thru-RPG. And he has a number of really, sort of kaiju-level monsters that have characteristics like that as well. Sort of, land, continent-shattering or affecting monsters.
Oh, and our final comment comes again from Richard Penwarden, who reminds us of the old adage about adversity making strange bedfellows and the enemy of my enemy being my friend. This is another neat way to use insurmountable encounters when you can turn two different insurmountable encounters against each other. I've definitely run games where there's the unstoppable army of orcs is bearing down on the village, and the players, rather than building up their own army to oppose this force of orcs, just find another warlord, get the two angry at each other, and they slaughter each other. And that can be tremendous fun, especially if you have player characters that love to spin lies, spread rumors, to really bullshit and manipulate people. Also had games where a rogue god was rampaging through a forest. Well, they desecrated a temple of a different god that opposed that god, and when that god came down to smite them, saw the first god as the bigger threat, and so the two gods went to war, leveled the countryside, but it stopped what could have spun out of control into a bigger apocalyptic event.
And we've done that before, too, have like a party mashup, and it's unfortunate if you have sort of stupid players involved in something like that, because they end up just trying to kill each other off in the first scene. And that's pretty much the scenario if they don't understand that they need to be working together to overcome something that would be insurmountable. But Will, you probably remember a really fun scenario that we've run, the one that we call Return to the Burial Peaks. where basically it was our first nuisances scenario. We take a bunch of characters, including an anti-paladin and a good cleric and our halfling rogue Lolita, and they all end up encountering a spaceship that's embedded itself in the earth. And they have to go through some really harrowing kind of encounters. We've got something in there called a gelatinous tube, which is basically a gelatinous cube that's 100 feet long. I mean, just horrible, horrible stuff. And it's basically this party of everything from lawful good clerics to chaotic evil anti-paladins. And if they don't get their shit together and work together, there's no way they can survive. And frequently, when we run that, the party does not survive. But it doesn't matter because they're all pre-gens and it's just a one-off anyway. But yeah, that can be a lot of fun. It's a good question. And I think it can be a lot of fun to sort of get characters to set aside their differences. And that's a good trope.
How about you, Brendan? Are we still having some connectivity problems?
It feels like Weekend at Bernie's.
I think...
Well, we're listening.
I'm having
Go ahead,
a
Stephen
run.
Hawking. Are you there, Brendan?
Brendan is turning into a strange digital waveform as we speak. So I think that's a decent place to wrap up, though. We have had a good conversation about insurmountable encounters, so I guess we'll just go ahead and go into our final thoughts.
Brendan's been absorbed into the net.
He's going to merge with the sleepy voice of the internet.
He's the ghost in the shell.
Oh, man. You know, we do have to have a scenario with that title, and it has to be about, like, a haunted pearl in a magical clamshell.
Exactly. We've got to do that. Now we've got to do it.
Oh, yeah, if it's a pun-based title, we've got to go for it. Anyway, I guess, my own final thought, I love insurmountable encounters. They're great for role play. They're great for testing your player's ingenuity. They can do a lot. Just as a GM, be prepared to manage them, especially if your players aren't expecting an insurmountable encounter or just flat out don't think any encounter is going to be insurmountable. And I guess that's kind of the trick. There really is no such thing as an insurmountable encounter. It's simply all how you and your players approach it. And as always, you need to approach it in whichever way is the most fun for the people at the table. Brendan, your final thoughts, if they can come through.
Speaking of insurmountable.
This is a rogue AI that's keeping out one of our contributors. All right. Well, so Mike, I guess you have the absolute final thought.
Well, you called on Brendan before me, so I would have had it anyway. Yeah, I just checked the Infinity Online, and our Shireman, which I had actually written stats for some years back, isn't up there. So I'll get that posted tonight. And people should just keep an eye. My final word is keep an eye on the Infinity Online, because we've got new content going up there almost every single day. There's new game content going up almost every day, sometimes multiple times a day, and that's where we announce everything that we're releasing with Skirmisher and with our other co-publishers. So it's a great source of information. There's great essays and articles and game content. It is an online game magazine, d-infinity.net. There's good stuff going up constantly. Keep an eye on it, and feel free to comment on things. You know, click the +1s if you like the stories, click the likes if you like the stories, and comment on what we're doing, because we want it to be interactive.
Very cool. So, for myself, William T. Thrasher, for Michael Ovarhola, and for Brendan Cass, who sadly has been absorbed into the ether, hopefully we can take the cloud of ones and zeros he has become and reconstitute him into some kind of material form for next week. Until then, this has been D Infinity Live, and we will see you all next week.
Out here.